All right, good morning, everybody. Thanks for taking the time to join us today for our webinar about our new features with PrebuiltML. Hopefully everybody can hear me all right. And for those of you who have joined us before, you know that in your webinar controls you have the little chat window where you can send in a chat message, and maybe somebody can send me a chat now and just make sure that everybody's hearing me all right. But while I wait for that, I'll just remind you that you can enter a question there. Looks like people are hearing me. That's great. So you can enter a question, and if there's something that we can answer in the midst of this call, we'll do that. I'll try to answer those as we go along. Or if not, if we don't get to it, then we'll go ahead and follow up with you after the fact too. So perfect. I'm getting several messages saying people can hear, so that's great. So without any further introduction, I'm going to go ahead and get started. There's several things to go over today, some of them that are a little bit more involved, so this may be a little bit longer webinar, depending on how well we flow through it. But also just make you aware that it is being recorded, so if for some reason you need to bow out early, just let us know, send us an email, and we're happy to send you a link for that recording, assuming that technology works correctly here today. So we'll go ahead and get started here. We're talking about the new release that we just sent out, and that's version 4.11.12, either .3213 or 3214, whichever one that you might have. But this new version has updated and new features in it. One of them that we'll start off with relates to the 3D viewer. Some of you may not even be aware that there's a 3D viewer within the software and can be useful for viewing roofs. And that's what this little button here is as we look in the Plan tab in the upper right here, this Open 3D Viewer. If you click that, a separate window will open that looks like this, and you could view what your roof actually might look like. But previously, you didn't have the ability to actually adjust your roofs to have them positioned. So in this case, this is a job. I'll just go to another floor here real quick, an elevation view. This project has two roofs, a lower roof and an upper roof, so it looks like this. But when it comes to drawing the roof, previously you couldn't actually raise a certain section of the roof up. And we've added that capability in now for those of you who like to use that 3D viewer. So what you can do is you can select one or more than one areas. So I'm going to select the areas for this upper roof. And there's a new option called Z offset. So as opposed to X and Y axes is Z, you might think of as you look down on top of a plan, it's coming up toward you in a sense. So you're raising and lowering something. So I'm going to set this to custom, and I'm going to basically raise that roof up. We'll say 9 feet is going to work for most of them. There's one section over here that actually needs to be slightly different just because of how the roof runs there. So we'll change that one for that to 8 feet 4 inches. So you can enter 8 feet or inches and 16ths, I believe, as well. So we'll make those changes. And now when we have done that, if we come back and look in the 3D viewer, now what we have is we have this upper roof has been raised up and actually looks more like what you would expect for the whole project. So once again, the way you would get to that is you would go to a specific item, whether it's a roof container, or you actually can also go to a specific beam and do the same thing, and you're going to use the Z offset. So, and going on to another improvement that we made to a previous feature that we had released. I'm going to come to this floor plan, and last version we sent out, we gave you the ability to set a segment line to the condition of blocking. So it renders with that sort of blocking look, and you also are able to split your joist at that location if that was what your particular condition called for. What it didn't have previously was the ability to have an overlap on your joist when you had that blocking condition. but we've added that in now. So in this case, I have this condition for this segment line set to blocking split, which gives us that blocking look. But now I have the option for split overlap, so I could have my joists run past each other and lap over each other a certain distance, and that blocking feature will then adjust again accordingly based on that spacing. So that's new in this version, a new improvement to that other blocking split feature. Continuing on then to another small item, but might be big for some of you, and I can't demonstrate it very well in this file, but it's strictly that if you started to draw a new segment line or linear or some kind of linear type tool, and you go to set the application, in the application shortlist will be wall assembly now. So it will, even if you hadn't already drawn wall assemblies in your project, that will be one of the items on that permanent shortlist. So we found that many of you used wall assemblies on a regular basis and wanted to have quick access to that instead of having to go in and dig for it at the beginning each time. So that's been added into that permanent shortlist. One of the new things that we're excited about being able to roll out is some integrations we've made for being able to export information about items that you've drawn to a single member sizing software. And just to clarify again, like I think all of you who are users of the software know, Prebuilt is not design software. It doesn't analyze the building and determine that you are using the proper material. That's assumed that you are making those right choices as the estimator or as the engineer has specified. But we also found that or believe that there's maybe some opportunities for being able to take the things that you've drawn and send them out to a single member sizing software such as BC Calc or Forte. And so we've implemented that option here in this new version. So for example, let's say that I've followed the plan and I've drawn in this Versalam that's here at the front side of this floor system. I now have the option to right click on this member, and I can go and choose member calculation, which you can see right there. I'm going to choose the option to send to BC Calc. It's going to pop up a preview window, and it's going to show me information about that particular member that I sent. It's this product, it's this many plies, it's that long, and here are the bearings. Now, in this case, there are no bearings that have been found for it. So if we were to come back and look, we would see, yeah, we haven't drawn any extra bearing walls here for it to pick up on. So since there aren't any bearings drawn in, we just assume that there must be a bearing one on each end and that it must be bearing on a wall. So in this case, we have this Versalam. But let's just, for demonstration purposes, I'm going to also add a post in here halfway across or partway across, just to show you that it will pick up on things like that as well. So if once again we decide that we're going to send this item to BC Calc, we get that preview window, but notice this time that I've got a couple other things. I've got one other thing, and that's this unspecified bearing. I hadn't indicated that it was a post at all or a particular product, but it's a post and it's located at that location, and then I've got my default bearings. I can set the building code to whatever I feel is appropriate. If you're a user of BC Calc, you're familiar with that. So once I select that, now I can go ahead and click OK. And this interfaces not with your BC Calc desktop, but rather it interfaces with the BC Calc that's the new web version. And my understanding from Boise is that in the pretty near future, the desktop version will actually be phased out completely, and the web version is what they will be going to. So if you haven't made that transition already, you may want to start looking at the options with BC Calc, the web version. But I'll click OK, and when I do, it's going to open a web browser, and it's going to have sent that over. And you may need to create an account if you haven't already. So I'll just sign into my account here and I'll get signed in. And now that I'm signed in, I'll actually resend that over. So I'm going to come here to member calculation and send to BC Calc, and I'll send this over. Okay, and so now that I'm logged in, it's going to bring that calc in. Hopefully here in just a second. We'll finish coming through. Well, for some reason it's not wanting to work at the moment. But I'll work on that and apologize for that. But I'm going to go ahead and also demonstrate, then you can also have this work for your Forte as well. So that should be functional. I'm not sure why this isn't working quite at the moment, but I'm going to go ahead and show you that in addition to the BC Calc, you're able to go ahead and choose to export a Forte job file. So again, Forte single member sizing for warehousers things. So I'm going to come to this floor joist, which is a TGI option. I'm going to go to member calculation and export to Forte job file. And again, I'll note that at the moment with this release, this is intended to work with the desktop version of Forte. It will work with both. So if you are a current desktop version and if you would like to open that file that you're exporting, a Forte job file, then you can use the Launch Forte checkbox. Or what you can uncheck that box and just click OK and choose to save that file. And we'll just call this our Forte Calc. Save it to the desktop, and that will get saved. And now that we have that file saved, I can go to the Forte web. So for those of you who aren't familiar, Forte is also being transitioned to the web environment. And so I'm going to come to the Forte web option, go to the file manager, click on the import button, and I'm going to find that file that we just created, that Forte Calc, which is right here. Click open, and it's going to import that file. Click OK, and it's going to open that file, and so there it is, been brought in. So you'll notice that this receives the member name is C2, and if we open this up, take a look inside. Here's our length. It's that particular member that we did. It was in a hanger on one end, bearing on a wall on the other end. And at that point, I could choose to add in additional loads that needed to be applied or change the loading and adjust things as needed. So the loading information is not provided by PrebuiltML. So it's sent over to either BC Calc or to Forte, but the loading should be reviewed within Forte or BC Calc. Some loading may come in by default just because that's how Forte and BC Calc work, but that's not coming from pre-built. So you'll want to review and make sure that your loads are appropriate, and then you could go on to product selection, specify, and ultimately give to a solution that actually works and verify that, oh yeah, that does actually work and it's functional in that case. But one thing I did want to point out again was that the title that we gave to this was C2, and that is coming from us, and that is cross-referenced back to this new label that's onto the members that you send to Calc. So that first one we sent over to BC Calc was C1 for Calc 1, and this one that we had sent to Forte is C2 for Calc 2. So you have the option to send two different items at the same time as well. So if I had a collection of beams that I wanted to send all at once, I could select that beam and this beam and hold down Control and right click, and I could choose to send those things to Calc as well. So that's the opportunity for exporting something. Again, it's going to take the geometric data and send that out so that you can actually do the calc in the separate software. So continuing on now to Another couple of items related to framing layouts. One thing for framing layouts, I'm going to come here to one that I've already created for a large building, for a small portion of a large building. Click View, and you'll notice that if I zoom in a little bit closer here, that the labels aren't as clear as maybe I would want them to be. They're a little bit fuzzy, just because the page is so large, the labels are so small, and the resolution isn't as good. So for those of you who aren't familiar, if you have large projects and you need to, you can come to the Profile tab, come to General, and here under Capture Resolution, you can choose to change that from medium to a few different options. And one of the things we've added in is ultra high now. So for those of you who just have exceptionally large projects and you just want things to be a bit more clear, I'm going to change that. Come to Plan, actually come back to Framing Layouts, and if I were to viewport recapture that particular layout so that it's basically done again at that high resolution when that capture is made, now if I zoom in over in this corner, you can see that the label is much more clear, even though they're still quite small given the size of the building. So for those of you who do some high density housing work, there's another level of resolution that's available for you to use. Also in the framing layouts area, we've introduced some other kind of fun ability, and that is on the framing layout itself. So I'm going to view this particular one for this upper floor framing. And in previous versions that we noticed that you can right click and reposition the image. So I can move this around, and also that means that over here, even underneath the material list, that image will show up. So you can position that image wherever you would want to on the page. But in addition to that, now in this version, you also have the ability to reposition other items on the page, such as the material list. You can click and drag that down, move your notes up, move details that you may have put onto the page and move those around. Or you can set them back to their position by right-clicking on them and choose Reset Position. But now you have that flexibility. It's going to remember those settings that you make for that particular framing layout. So that when you close it down and reopen it, it will still be in those positions when you reopen that same framing layout back up again. In addition to that flexibility, you also can choose to have your details arrayed from certain directions. So those of you who use framing details in some way, I'm going to choose to make this, I've created a new framing layout style here with 1117 details in my upper corner. So if I was to view that layout that way, now my details array up here from the upper left-hand corner, and they go down the page. I could also choose to have them go from the upper left-hand corner across the page. So settings that you have for where those things go by default. But again, you can then take those and move them wherever you want. Put that for approval nodal right over underneath your material list to make it nice and clear. So lots of flexibility available now in framing layouts. To make that details setting change, as far as where they're laid out from, you go to the profile, and you can either add a new framing layout style or edit an existing one. And when you do, you'll have this option now for detail placement. It should be either top left or vertical, or make changes for horizontal or lower left, and whatever your desire is. All right, back over in the Framing Layouts tab. Another small change relates to how you would rename a framing layout, and that is you have this Edit button now. Before you could click into the field, but we've changed that so where you need to click the Edit button and make that change. And the reason for that change is so that you can actually now drag and drop your framing layouts into the order that you would want. So you can grab this front elevation and drag it up here or drag it back down. Whatever order that you would want it to be, you can reorder by dragging and dropping your framing layouts. And so now as we come to sort of the last section, which is a little bit larger section in this demonstration, relates to the ability to handle option type projects. But I'm going to pause here for a moment and say, even if you don't do option type jobs, and I'll explain that in a moment, The features that I'm going to go over here and show you in the next few minutes are not limited only to option type jobs or projects. So you actually may find value in these 2 or 3 of these features that I'm going to show you about that we've implemented for the purpose of option type jobs, but they have utility in other environments as well. So maybe if you don't do option type jobs, don't let your eyes glaze over too quickly, because you actually still might find value in some of these new features that we've put in place. So what are we talking about with option type jobs? Most of us uh, probably know what I mean, but just to make sure that we're on the same page, I'm going to come back to this plan. And here's just a simple plan or an example. So here we've got this project. It's got an upper floor and a lower floor. But one of the things that's noted on this plan is it has option number 1, a bedroom 4 with bath 3. So this house or this plan could be built in one of 2 ways, or actually maybe even more than that. You could build it the standard way, or you could choose to include option number 1 with it. This plan also has elevation B as another option. So now you have several variations of how this particular blueprint could be made. Now, if you're just doing a blueprint that's for a specific site model, and you're doing a takeoff for just a specific way it's being built, then that's pretty straightforward. But if you're trying to do a takeoff that allows you to get an appropriate material list that covers all the different variations that might be involved, it's for that reason that we implemented some of these new features. And so the way that we approached it, just to kind of a quick aside here, comes down to this: is the idea is that first you would do a takeoff using your standard list. So this would be like the vanilla version of the project, just the most basic, straightforward version of that the plan could be built. You would do a takeoff on that standard list, make sure it's good, get it right, get it the way you want it. After you have that in place, then you're going to go to and take a copy of your standard list. You're going to copy that, move it over, and you're going to edit that standard list in order to be one of the different variations. So in this example, elevation B. So you'll copy over everything you've done and make the tweaks and changes to this new copy and turn it into what it would be needed to build elevation B. In a similar way, if you had an additional option, like maybe there was a media room option, to follow that path, you would do the same thing again. You're going to copy the standard list. So now you have a separate copy of it. That's a copy of the vanilla version. And then you would make the changes to that copy that would make it to be built for the media room option. So then when you're done, you're going to end up with 3 lists: the standard list, what you would need to build just the option with elevation B, and what you would need to build it with just the variation of the media room option. But then what you're able to do is you're able to run a report at the end, and you can compare, oh, here's what I need to do to build elevation B, compare that to the standard list, and what materials do I need to add, and what materials do I need to subtract in order to achieve that particular option. Or again, with the media room option, I can compare the media room option list back to the standard list and say, okay, what do I need to add and subtract in order to get to the media room option? And so then you can imagine then by having this, you would be able to look, even with 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 different options, you'd be able to say, oh, these are what I need to add and subtract in order to achieve that. So that's the concept that we were following as we built these new features that I'm going to show you. So the first of these features is the ability to do that copy that I was just referencing. How do you copy your base standard list? So I'm going to come over here to my project, come to my list tab, and I've got elevation A. This is my standard vanilla version of my project. I've done the takeoff, I've done all the work that I need for it. And now I want to work on one of the potential options. So I'm going to right click on elevation A, choose copy list. This feature has always been here, but we've made a change to it, or an additional control. And that's this right here, clone links, meaning that you're going to copy the takeoff items to new digitizer pages. So I'm going to choose that, and I can retain my notes and images as well, or uses notes. I'll give this a new name. I'm going to name it the title, Elevation A, and we'll call this with bedroom 4, since that's the option variation I'm working on. I'll click OK, and it's going to go ahead and copy that list and make a new one. So just like we would expect, here in just a moment, this new tab is going to show up. So here, Elevation A with bedroom 4. And it's an exact copy, just like you would expect. But the difference that's happened with that clone feature is if I come over to Plan, here are the pages that I had before, but further down in the pages list, now I have a new folder that's been created for me called, what I named that list, Elevation A with bedroom 4. And I have additional plan pages in it. These have been newly created with new takeoff items. And just to be clear on what's happened, let's go back here to our list. I'm going to go back to our original Elevation A list, come to an upper floor, and let's come to this beam right here. And I can use the zoom to function. This will bring into view in the digitizer that particular takeoff item that I'm linked to. If I come to plan, here I am on that first page. Here's that beam drawn right here. And here I am on that page right here at the beginning of the list. So it's what I originally drew. But if I'm on the second list, so this is the list that I copied, I come to my upper floor, I come to that same beam, and I do a zoom to on that. See, where is this takeoff item that I'm linked to? Come back to the plan. Notice I'm no longer on that first page anymore. Instead, I'm now on this new page that's down here, and I'm linked to this newly created beam. So the objects that I'm linked to are now completely separate from the objects that I'm linked to on the first page, which means I can go ahead and make changes to all of these takeoff items to adjust it for that bedroom 4. So like in this example, let's say that, well, the exterior walls need to change. So I'm going to, these exterior walls now follow this direction. So I'll adjust these exterior walls and position them accordingly. And in case you're wondering, I'm not going to take the time to do absolutely everything about this, so don't fear. But I can remove this header because it doesn't apply anymore. And I can reshape these ceiling joist containers. And I'll restretch this. I can add in some new interior walls. I'm going to draw more sections like this, add in some more interior walls where they belong. Right there. And here as well. Okay, so I've added in those additional ones that were required. And the idea continues. I could come over here to where in this section now, since this is going to be, this is ceiling joist before, but since this upper floor has expanded over into this area, I could select all these particular joists right here, these what previously were ceiling joists, and I could then move those into the floor joists. You can do a move selection here, and those change. And you know that can continue on with rim and other things, but you get the idea. But now, because I've made those changes here in this elevation A, over back here in the list, my upper floor joists have been updated accordingly. This list has been updated to reflect that option change. But my original list has remained untouched since I did that clone linked items option. Again, if I was to have if I had another option, let's say there was an elevation B, so I can right click and I can choose to copy list. Again, follow that clone links pattern. Retain usages, sure. We'll call this elevation B. So this is a variant now. And now I can go and make the changes that would be needed to make this, what do I need to change about elevation A in order to make it appropriate build list for elevation B. So I could come to it, maybe it's just the exterior trim. I can come to my board siding and change it, or the lap siding. I'll change it from hardy plank, just for a simple example, I'll just change it to some vinyl. Maybe that's what the elevation B was calling for. And I'll make that change. And now that change is done. It's also been set. If I came over here to the plan, I've got a new folder, Elevation B. So all those takeoff items that are here could be adjusted, changed accordingly, and only Elevation B would be. So that's the first feature, is being able to do a copy and clone those takeoff items. But going on from there, as how can you report on that? How can you use that? And so that's the second feature set that we've introduced here, is a new option for reports. So let's say now that I want to produce what I was talking about at the beginning, a report that shows me the material list and then the adds and subtracts that I might need for those individual items. I'm going to come to reports, and I'm going to come to the plus button here. I'm going to make a new style report. I'll need to pick either condensed or direct ship for this to work. And I'll choose QL, but the new thing that I have down here is this third radio button, list comparison. So I can choose list comparison, and what it's going to do is allow me to specify what's my primary list, which is the one that I want to compare to. Everything's going to compare against this one, and I'll choose Elevation A. And then I can choose what list do I actually want to compare to Elevation A. In this case, I'll choose the option with Bedroom 4 and Elevation B. And I'll leave it as this primary list with add and subtract. Click OK. Here's my new report, and I'll choose to view that report. It's going to come into view. Let's make this a little bigger so we can see it. And kind of what you're used to, you get first that material list for Elevation A, all the standard list of materials. Here's main wall materials, upper floor, upper wall, roof, exterior trim, and so on. But as you get further down to the bottom, now you have a couple other things. Here we have Elevation A with Bedroom 4, upper floor materials to add, or upper wall materials to add, or upper wall materials to remove. So you know now what would you need to do to the material list if you were going to have Bedroom 4. You would need to add in these materials. You would need to subtract these materials. The same would be for Elevation B. Here would be the materials that you would need to remove if you were doing Elevation B. Here would be the materials that you would need to add if you were doing Elevation B. Sorry, add first, then remove. So the report shows you the add and subtract opportunities that are there. One other variation that's there, if we click on view, or not view, if we come back to the report style, is you could choose to have things shown to you in the add and subtract values, but you can also choose to have those add and subtract values just applied to the report. So let's just say that, well, I'm going to build, what I wanted to show me is a material list that does the adds and subtracts for me. So I'll choose this, click OK. So now it's going to compare, click view, and I've got a material list, but now I don't have any add and subtract sections down here at the bottom, because those add and subtracts have already been applied to the original list. So now I just have a single list of materials that's going to be used for, or going to be good for, building Elevation A with Bedroom 4, but actually it's the Elevation B version. So it's taking all of those changes that were needed and applying them and giving you one material list at the end. I know that was probably a little bit confusing if you're not familiar with option type jobs, but just be aware that that functionality exists. And if you want some more information on how to leverage that feature and you use option type jobs, then for sure you can give us a call and we're happy to talk with you more about how you can leverage that better. But one final comment I should note, that if you're thinking about using that in the future, when you divide your lists out as you work on that option project, you would need to have a separate list for each option. So if you have a media room option and a extended kitchen option, those would be two separate lists. But the other thing you should keep in mind is that if the media room option interacts with the extended kitchen option, meaning like if you do both of them, they interact with each other, then that would actually need to be a third list, a third variant that you would have to handle. But I will point out that for those of you who do compare reports for purposes of finding out, hey, what changed in my list when I'm doing revisions, then this new feature of comparing lists, instead of having to use this tools compare reports up here, that might be useful for some things, but you also might find it useful to do a compare list to accomplish some of those same things. It'll give you some more flexibility there. Okay, and finally, the third thing that we've added in, and this is a little bit more fun and uh, maybe useful to many of you in different environments, and that comes to framing layouts. So for those of you who might be doing option projects, if you're doing a bunch of layouts for the different variations for the media room option, for the extended kitchen option, you have a bunch of these different ones, instead of having to have so many different pages to show all those different ones, we've given you the ability to actually combine layouts onto a single layout sheet. So the way that you would do that is, let's say that I wanted to include all these first four buildings, or these first four layouts that I've created, and combine them onto a single layout sheet, a single layout page. To do that, I'm going to, and by the way, this checkbox up here is new. I can check or select all of them at once if I want to. But I'm going to uncheck this bottom one. So now I've got these four framing layouts selected. I'm going to choose this button right here, which is also new, Combine Selected Framing Layouts. Click the button. I'll give the combined framing layout a name. I'll just call it Options for now. And when I do, I've got this this newly added framing layout. And notice that it's a little bit different than the others. It's not a framing layout itself. It's more of the parent item or the control for these four that have been grouped together. Now I can still view these individually. I could still just view this framing layout by itself. But if I come to this parent item, this top level combined framing layout item, and click View, actually I'm going to change this to a 24 by 36 page first. Click View. Now I get a framing layout that combines all four of those framing layouts onto a single sheet. And integrating those two options, or those new options that I showed you earlier, just like this page over here, it still remembers how I move those things around. I can also move these different items around on each of the individual sections and adjust them accordingly. And notice that down here in this lower left-hand corner, we've got this front elevation. So for those of you who, again, like I mentioned, you may find useful value in this besides just option projects. Maybe you want to have a layout sheet that shows you all four elevations of your house and just show it all in one single layout sheet. You could do that here, you could imagine. Or if you just wanted to combine an upper floor and a lower floor on the same layout, you could also do that here as well. So the new feature there is the ability to combine layouts all in a single item. So I think that's everything that we have made available for this new release. So we'll go ahead and close it off there. I know it's kind of been a little bit longer session this time, but if you have any questions, feel free to give us a call, and we're happy to talk through any of those things anymore. So thanks for joining us again today, and we'll talk to you more later. Thanks very much.